Hey guys, doing a little different playing explain this time. Playing in this coin poker mid-stakes world championship. Right out of the gate, we're playing a pot. Check raise flop, pot turn on the queen, and I face a raise. I mean, he's saying he has a better hand than me, so I'm gonna call, and we'll have a river decision. Block value, but also not really sure what he's gonna bluff here in this line. Check raise flop, big bet turn. So he has to raise like on this river. He can't even raise a flush draw, obviously, because flush draw is now the nuts. Sorry, if he was bluffing the turn with a flush draw, that's now the nuts. So his range is very strong on this river compared to how unnatural it is to bluff this spot. So I think I'm just gonna fold the trips with even though I have the jack of spades, it just feels like a not a great spot. I'm gonna fold the bear gut shot to a big bet down bottom right. But yeah, so just gonna play 4 tables of this challenge. It's, those of you who aren't familiar with it, Coin Poker's putting this on. They did a high stakes challenge in December, and now they're doing a mid stakes one right now. So it's for basically the full month of June. They alternate weeks between ante and non-ante. So this is one of the non-ante weeks. So yeah, we're just gonna hop in, try and play our best. This is kind of odd to play this size lead multi-way on this flop. I'm gonna, with the large club and a gutter, 2 overs, we're gonna call. But due to, we're actually not that high in range now based on this formation. So if he bombs turn, this hand's probably just a fold. First half pot again, I guess we're gonna call it. Probably raise this hand low frequency. With call. And then, so versus check, this is gonna be basically the weakest hand we ever have. And we don't have a super nutted range here. I think we have say low frequency shove and then a lot of this size. And we take it down. Bottom left, defended multi-way with queen 9 suited. Opponent stabs multi-way on this board. Not a great turn for our hand, but not the worst for our range. We should have ace 4, ace 5. We should have definitely the most deuce 3. And then on this queen river, I think we're gonna want to mix pretty high frequency bet, but we're gonna do some checking, protect our 5x, 4x. I think he's gonna have queen x himself and then some bluffs. And he just has the counterfeit 2 pair. If we bet face raise, it's not amazing. And he has a very strong candidate to raise if we do lead. Bottom right, we open 6s and button flats. Going to be do a lot of checking on this board out of position. And versus the really small bet. It's not amazing, but I think basically your pairs are gonna, just if you think of your range, we're gonna have queen 10 offsuit, no heart, and that'll have to fold a lot of offsuit trash basically. So you're gonna need to check call pretty often versus the small bet. And then, obviously check call some strong hands in that line as well. Kind of odd, again, face this turn size. I'm going to fold 6s, but we would call a lot of hands here. Multi-way without, I have this, we'll say the gut shot draw, but it's not going to be that clean on a 3, or sorry, on a deuce. One of them's gonna have a 6 quite often. I'm gonna check again, and pretty interesting run up. We have the nuts. The board is a straight. This guy should be relatively aggressive. He's gonna have He doesn't have a ton of 8x here, but he's gonna have a lot of flushes in the big blind. He just has the most like suited stuff, so wouldn't be surprised to see him take a stab at this. And no matter what he does, this guy's super capped, so I'm just gonna shove. I mean, basically my bluffs here would be just any ace of hearts hand that floated the flop. You know, even pocket aces is a reasonable hand, but yeah, just considering we have the nuts on a chop board, gonna be a good spot to be aggressive. Also, not a spot I necessarily think if I raise non-all in that I'm going to get a ton of rebluffs out of you know, either player. Top left, our hand would be reasonable to do a lot of things versus, you know, checkbacks, small bets, but versus the large bet, we have basically the worst possible hand we can have. So, fold, no equity, 9 high, and he has the same hand. So he got us off a chop. Mono board, low and connected. Can't do too much betting here. So start check. This hand is actually like a reasonable bet. Just it doesn't like check call super well, but could get him to fold like queen 10, king 10, ace 10, you know, queen jack, king jack, just like all these type of hands that don't have a spade. Has 2 overs to the board, has a gut shot. I'm gonna call though. Again, we have like a nut gut shot. It's not amazing, but small bet, 2 overs to the board with a gut shot. It's gonna make a reasonable check call. Goes check, check. I think we can use some biggish sizes on river. If he bets turn, okay. I don't think we want to go too big here now. We definitely could have a very large size because when he checks turn, we're gonna have way more straight flushes and nut flushes. But board pairing river, I think it's just good to kind of use like a medium size. Expect to get called always by a strong flush like this hand. I mean, this hand is just gonna pure call, but he's gonna have weaker hands that are gonna be in a tough spot. And like seeing his hand doesn't make me think I wish I'd gone bigger or something. But it is definitely a spot, probably on that run out. If the board didn't pair on the river, I think using a very large size would be good. Because we're going to have a significant nut advantage, especially if my opponent's not being careful with his check back range there. So some sort of like, I mean, you could develop a jam strategy, but you know, at least 150, 200% pot, 300% pot potentially. Those are all like reasonable strategies there. And the more capped you think your opponent is, the more you can leverage bigger bets and therefore more bluffs. For the purpose of this challenge, since it's rake free, I forget if I mentioned that, I'm going to be min opening the first 2 positions, 2.2, the cutoff, 2.5, the button, 3x, the small blind. On this board, especially in these wide range formations, going to be a very high frequency C bet for us. Our opponent is going to be defending like, you know, really trash offsuit high card hands. So on like paired boards that don't have any connectivity, they're going to struggle, especially a board like ace-ace-9 where there's no draws, and you know they'll have hands like, you know, king deuce suited and even like king 8 off and stuff like that. Depending on the positions, maybe even hands as weak as king 7 off, king 6 off. So yeah, they're gonna have just very miserable hands that are going to be in a tough spot even versus small bet. So especially on the boards where we flop a lot of trips, and ace-ace-9, we're obviously going to flop a lot of trips. Good board to do a lot of betting. So if you're not familiar with this challenge, most of the people playing in these games will be a professional of some, you know, a professional or at least like an avid poker player. And there'll be a few players who play more recreational that will splash in. But yeah, most of the people you're playing against are going to be very competent opponents. So it's, I'm not necessarily trying to like compete to win this thing. There is a cash prize, so if you win the most money after the month is concluded, you get I believe it's a $15,000 Rolex, some cash prizes, and then I think the top 5 spots all get paid. But that requires like a lot of grinding. So I'm not necessarily trying to like win this, and initially I hadn't even planned to play much of it, but I started just like mixing it in with my grind, and it's basically just been like kind of a lot of fun. You get to battle against good players at not like nosebleed stakes, or even just like $500 is kind of just like a nice stake. It's like the money's obviously significant, but you're not gonna bust your roll playing it. And the competition's good, and you just get this every time someone wins the pot, they have to show their hands. Every table on coin poker in this challenge is a show table, so whoever wins the pot has to show their hand. So it just creates like a pretty fun dynamic. You see some interesting showdowns. You get to test your assumptions in different spots. So bottom right, we have to be pretty selective. Like I know we've turned a gutter here, but we have to be somewhat selective here with what we stab. I think 5-4 with a club is actually like relatively reasonable. We actually block a reasonable amount of his ace-x. So I think this should stab sometimes, but we have to be careful. And choosing not to stab into aces is a pretty good result. I'm going to 3-bet the Jack-10 suited. And versus the button check down spot here, I'm gonna go for a bet. It's a little dicey, but he should have like some deuce X, 3s, 4s, 5s, ace highs. I do expect to get raised here reasonably often because he should play a lot of 10x in this line. But yeah, I expect to see a lot of hands like this that won't bet but could call a bet themselves. I 3-bet versus cutoff open. Going to continue this flop with a small bet and check call turn. I'm not familiar with this opponent, so could be just a recreational player splashing about, could be a new player to the challenge. Either way, our hand makes a pretty easy check call on the turn. And then we'll have a decision on the river. 10 of clubs won't be amazing, but he's not gonna have that many bluffs. So, he won't have that many bluffs to contain the 10 of clubs, mainly like ace 10. However, on this river, 10 of clubs now becomes significantly worse because a lot of his bluffs, were diamonds, and the ones that weren't diamonds were 10x. So now it's just going to be difficult for our opponent to have enough bluffs on this round. So these type of boards, I think there's lots of approaches you could take that are fitting on a board like this. I think kind of like a middling size works reasonably well, and having a club having a significant range advantage. I'm going to bet this hand. It's this hand's, we'll say almost like a little mergy. We'll get a few better hands to fold, some ace highs, maybe some king queen without a club, and then maybe some hands like deuces. And then we'll sometimes get called by hands we dominate, some flush draws and stuff. Turn, I'm gonna bet this sometimes. The 7 of clubs is not amazing, so we're gonna check this time. And I'm gonna versus the big 3-bet. I'm gonna 4-bet this time with ace jack off. And we're gonna sometimes raise the river. Can't call this hand, obviously. And this time we're just gonna fold. I think obviously pretty reasonable turn barrel, but not mandatory. Okay, we see none of these paired boards. This board you have to be a little more selective with your c-bets on, just because even though the big blinds range is wide, they will contain more trips than we will. But they also just have so much, the hands we talked about, the later we open, they have hands like you just offsuit trash, like king 9 off, especially since I min opened, queen 9 off, queen, king 7 off potentially, and then even just the suited ones that have nothing going with them. On this turn, we're going to bet again, leverage our just overpair advantage. We're going to defend the queen 7 off in this rake environment. There's no ante, but small open on the button, and a no rake environment, we have like reasonable high cards. Defend here with the king jack suited, and obviously nice that we river. This card doesn't really change anything though for our hand. We're still losing. I mean, I guess if he's trapping pocket 8s, it helps us against that hand. I'm gonna stab this sometimes. Just check. But in general, my opponent's range is going to be in a really annoyed spot. I'm just gonna play a lot of pot on this river with both value and bluffs. This time we happen to have a very strong hand, but if we get raised, it is like, we'll say dicey. Opponent checks back, raises turn. I'm gonna be, this is the one size I'm gonna use. So even though I have a 7 here, I don't have to defend this that often. Versus the raise. King jack, I'm gonna check again twice. Just not. I mean, this hand's reasonable stab turn. But my opponent doesn't have much 8x, so it's not like, even though I just say we'll block king 8 suited, jack 8 suited, those aren't really gonna make up any portion of his 3-bet range in these positions. And then I think a lot of just 2/3 on this river is reasonable. Maybe a little bit of a bigger size, but go for a bet. And similar to the queen 7, if I get raised here, I block some of his improves, but not really. Like, I mean, jacks would definitely play this way. So I guess I have a reasonable, but I don't think kings plays this way. So I guess when I want to hero call this hand, I just play ace jack this way. So if I bet, I'm gonna have queen x in this line. I should have even some 8x in this line. I have 10-9 in this line for sure. And I have pocket jacks myself. So those hands will make pretty, obvious bet calls. And then queen jack, actually, sorry, I forgot to mention that hand will make it into that range as well. So like those hands will all make pretty easy river calls. And then king jack, I think probably just bet folds. Because I think the thinnest value you can have for a raise on the river would be like aces. Maybe people aren't going thin enough there with like aces, but I would just think like kings just wouldn't make it to the river very often in that line. It's gonna like bet flop high frequency, and then if it misses a flop, it's gonna bet turn high frequency. So having a king, I think I only really block bluffs. Going to mainly call these positions with ace queen off. Depending on my opponent's size, just like one of our best ace size. We should even have some ace king here. Versus this size, very easy call. I'm gonna just fold ace deuce off. On this turn, don't really block bluffs, have like relatively clean overs. His range is relatively strong when he opens under the gun and c-bets this board. So it's just gonna depend. If he c-bets like 2x pot, then I'll have to fold. And then even on this river, I'm not going to be bluffing ace queen ever. He bets small enough that we have a lot of just random overcard hands. We could even maybe bluff some weaker ace high, but I think this hand just shows down for enough of the pot. And then like this type of hand, it was, I don't think, really generating EV with our hand versus that hand, because if we bet, it's pretty likely he could just call or bluff raise a hand like that. Going to mix 4-bet and fold in most scenarios here. This time we're going to 4-bet. In the I guess rake free environment, it might be a little closer with ace queen, as in maybe you don't want to even fold it much. But yeah, typically that hand's gonna be a 4-bet or fold those positions. We're going to defend pocket fives to 3-bet. And we're going to flat, mainly flat here, threes. You're gonna play, you know, a lot more flats in this environment. And versus the large c-bet on Jack Queen 6, we're just gonna fold. You're probably gonna have to defend, versus this size, you will have to defend every pair. I think it's reasonable to raise a hand like this sometimes. Will depend on my opponent's turn strategy. So versus this size, we have 2 outs to the nuts. We're gonna have Queen X, strong draws. He hasn't overbet anything, so I think every pair is going to mix. So I'm gonna fold threes this time then. And reasonable fold. Not gonna be defending a hand like this multi-way versus 2.5x, especially like this. Again, this week there's no antes. That was, I guess, another benefit of playing this challenge is I haven't played a ton of anti-cash. So playing in this challenge kind of gave me some experience with that. And I'm going to Vegas this summer to play the main. So I'll be playing some no ante deep poker for the first few days. So it's reasonable practice for that. Very connected board, very good for the big blind. So going to be, you know, doing a lot of checking on this board. And this hand is going to be a check. Turn versus bet, versus check is interesting. We have a potential value bet. My opponent should be betting this turn pretty often. He should also go for some check raises as well. But I think with like nut ace high, it's pretty reasonable to play some bets here. My opponent can check call draws. If he check raises, this hand's gonna be a fold. But this, I'm not obviously just taking ace king into this line. I'm gonna have very strong hands like 5x boats. A lot of those type of hands in this line. All right, good start. Bottom right, we flop a set on a dynamic board. We're gonna 3-bet this time with the king queen, and I'm gonna check raise my pocket fours. And yeah, got some nice value on the turn. This hand's going to be a 3-bet fold. We're dodging bullets, you know. A lot of our folds have run into aces and kings and stuff. I'm just going to keep betting here. I'm not familiar with this opponent. I think it's pretty likely that he could be a recreational player, and I think he's going to just call more than he's going to bet himself. Same idea here. Even though we unblock all of his potential bluffs, he's also going to have a lot of high card hands that don't need to bluff. So like ace high misdraws, even a hand like queen jack versus my range doesn't really need to bluff. So we're just gonna shove and we'll lose to a boat if he has one, and we'll beat the rest of his range. But there you go, like that type of hand. Very likely to check back if we check, but we'll always call if we bet. All right, top left. It's gonna be like the weakest hand I'll defend. I 3-bet tight formations. I get cold 4-bet, but I think ace queen suited, I'm still gonna call in position. But this flop will be pretty dicey. You know, his cold 4-bet range is gonna contain a little bit of jacks, potentially a little bit of tens, some ace 5 suited, and then you know the obvious candidates: aces, kings, ace king, potentially some king queen suited as well. So going to continue with a lot of caution. And now we even lose to ace 5. So I think if he bets turn, my hand's just going to be a fold. Like, he has to basically be bluffing here with jacks. His range is so strong here. It's, even though he's betting small, I'm not okay folding. He basically has to be bluffing with jacks, but again, kings again. So we've been dodging some monsters in some of these spots. I mean, again, that's gonna be a pretty reasonable like proportion of his range. There's gonna be a lot of scenarios where your hand could even just fold pre-flop. But I just think ace queen suited is going to make it in there reasonably often as a defend. If you're currently, playing in or around these stakes, this, 500 L rake free, I would encourage you to play a little bit of this. It's pretty, it wouldn't be it's not necessarily going to be the best place to build your bankroll, because you're going to be playing against tough opponents. Specifically, the cash game challenge is what I'm talking about. Obviously, there's good games on coin poker you can play. But yeah, specifically this challenge might not necessarily be the best for building your bankroll, but it will make you a better player, because you get real-time feedback every time you make a decision. Especially any times you decide not to bluff and check fold to a bet, or you just fold to a bet from your opponent and think, well, my opponent's not going to have enough bluffs in this spot. Then those opponents, or those spots, you can kind of like check your assumptions, come back at that spot next time with like a different approach. Maybe go do some studying off the tables after your session. With this is very interesting. My opponent is not very incentivized to flat here versus an open. So I'm somewhat concerned he has aces. So I would normally just squeeze this, but it's just very peculiar to play much of. Okay, I am gonna bet here though. we'll be cautious against this opponent. I don't think it's that crazy to have flats like this strength of hand anyways, so that's another reason I decided to flat. So yeah, if this guy wants to put a lot of money in now, I will be concerned. Okay, I'm gonna call. I have jacks of the diamond, but it's not looking super likely. Just this whole line thus far, it's making me feel like this opponent has a very strong hand. And there's no side pot, so if he leads the turn, this turn's not great for his range. For his range of what we are saying is aces. And I have jacks with a diamond. I wouldn't normally play jacks this conservatively here. It's gonna be hilarious when he just shows me like, I don't know, queen 10 of hearts or something, and I just got the stone minimum. I mean, very bad river for his range, because like there's no way he should flat a 7. All right, I'm gonna check back. Let's hope we see aces and we're right and we don't. I don't think it's the worst way to play this hand anyways, but it just felt a lot like aces. And he did have the queen 10 of spades. I was just way off. Just see, very, very odd spot to flat queen 10 suited versus a 12 big blind open, those positions. Not that you're not ahead of his range, but maybe that was part of his plays. He just figured when he flats there, his range looks super strong, so that nobody will mess with him and he'll see more flops. But yeah, very interesting hand. But in some ways, we got the maximum by flatting. Obviously, the one thing we could have done different is bet turn. fly with sixes. Club spade is going to make a reasonable stab. Just going to play 1/3 mainly here. Seems reasonable. Mainly, I'm just going to fly here with the 4-3 suited. So that's a pretty dicey or annoying turn card. Our hand is now 6 high, and we block the cards we want. So that even though we have, okay, well, reasonable river. If he checks, now we have a value bet. Yeah, we block like the bluffs on flop. Okay, that's just because we want him to like float some sort of like club spade type holdings. So in this line, now we've rivered value because he's going to bet most of his boats himself. But on the turn, I think we have a really bad bluff. We'll definitely want to bluff the turn, but even if you have like deuces that stab the flop, that would make a better turn bluff. On the left here, I think this hand can bet the turn sometimes. Keep making some nice rivers. And I think I'm just going to go for like our value range is going to be like kind of some rivered 8x quite often, and then a fair amount of bluffs. So he shouldn't have too many better hands than an 8 on this river himself. So I think this size with an 8 makes sense. Also, like when we have some queen x, we should play this way, and we should have some 5x. I mean, I block pocket 3s and I don't block 5-3. But I think I'm going to call this one. I think this hand just has like very good blockers for this spot. So if he's going to slow play pocket 3s, makes a lot of sense. All right, nice hand. It's a spot where all of your flushes, like bottom of his value range there is going to be like nut flush. So obviously if you have the nut flush, you call, even if some of his bluffs will look like a hand like that. If you just at least, I guess you can't beat value though. So it is actually interesting. If he never shoves the king high flush, I guess your ace high flushes are actually also like indifferent, because and they might actually be worse calls, just because you block his bluffs. But anyways, any flush, the flushes with a pair are going to make very good bluff catchers. And so even though I have like the worst possible flush, like a 4 high flush, doesn't really matter that much because I don't think he's check jamming any middling flushes. I'm going to value bet here. My opponent should bet most of his hands better than mine by this river. It's a little thin, but we'll go for it. Like, he should mainly bet a jack on this river. I'll lose like ace 6, I guess. But yeah, if he's going to call ace 4, even better. Top left with queen 10, going to do a lot of checking. And queen 10 with a spade. Most of my bets on this turn are going to want to revolve around an ace. So we'll go for the 2/3 spot bet with this hand, bluff this hand. It's going to make good bluff on some rivers, really bad bluff on other rivers. And then it's going to make an interesting decision on this river. Mainly just going to check this hand, and then I can sometimes check raise bluff this hand, blocking the rivered straight and the rivered flush. So just and queen 10. Sorry, ace 10. It's not actually amazing to block ace 10 here because ace 10 is always going to value bet, and then that hand is going to be one that one should potentially fold sometimes. But you know, you can't have everything, right? You got to pick some. There's going to be some properties of your hand that can't be perfect for bluffing. Rake free, gonna defend the ace 2 soft. This hand would not be a high frequency defend in a lot of scenarios. Top right with 9-7. I think I'm just gonna shy away. I mean, if I had the 7 of spades, this would definitely be a fold. 9 of spades doesn't make it as bad, but I think I'm just gonna mainly just not worry about defending this class of hand on this turn. All right, we were drawing dead. I mean, it's worked out. We've been somewhat fortunate in some of our cuspy folds in that our opponents have showed us the nuts in everyone. I think the mistake you can make in those spots is say like, wow, my opponents always have it. Especially that's what these tables can kind of lead you astray sometimes. You can think your opponents are always bluffing or are always value betting based on, you know, what you see. I think like we've just kind of had cuspy decisions, and it's kind of worked out that every time our opponent's been bluffing in those, you know, spots that we've went with fold over call or raise or whatever it may be. So top right, raise a6. 3-way flop, definitely going to want to do a reasonable amount of checking here. Small blind's range should do okay on this board. Big blind's range is going to be capped, but not to the point where we can just bet everything. So we're definitely going to do some bets and checks on flop. Bottom left, start with a check with 6s. This opponent is going to, you know, especially the big blind in these formations is going to be quite weak. And I think it's pretty reasonable versus their ranges to develop a delay small strategy here. Because the small blind's sandwiched in a very awkward spot when his range is going to be a lot of like middling pairs, Jack X. And then the big blind just has like, you know, nonsense a lot of the time. And then we're going to value bet the river here. A lot of my range on this river is going to be... Okay, this is interesting. It's just interesting, like, it's very hard for him to have a hand we lose to. It's like ace 8, ace 9, ace 10. Okay, and I think we'll call the video there. We'll be trying to post some more content, maybe, you know, more specifically for the Cone Poker Mid-Stakes World Championship. So stay tuned to the channel. Make sure to hit subscribe if you like the content, and we'll see you in the next one. All right, take it easy, guys.